wonderful to see you all here in one room together, the world's most troublesome journalists all in one room together. I do want to say that I have, yes, it's worth a clap. I think what you're clapping is the word troublesome, right? I do want to say that of all the impediments and problems we often face as investigative journalists, in the last 48 hours I've thought that maybe the biggest might be airport immigration officials. I apologize on behalf of the world's airport immigration officials. But it's great that you all made it here, and a very, very warm welcome to you. I have just two housekeeping things to kick off. The first is, if you want translation, we have in plenary sessions and in the major auditorium sessions in the Science Stadium, we have French and Portuguese simultaneous translation. For this session, if you want translation, please collect earphones at the back of the hall. And please remember to return them on your exit and collect them when you need them in the auditorium on the other side. Thank you. The other thing is to clarify the Wi-Fi. I've had a lot of queries this morning. I'm sorry that the nerds insisted on a complicated password. But the thing that many people are missing is that the I in Africa is a cap I. It's not a small I, it's not an L, it's a cap I. So the password is capW 3LCONE, welcome with a 3 for the E. Number 2, cap A Africa with a cap I and an @ for the A. It is, please, use it as it is on your card. Do not use it as it is in the printed program, as there's an error in that, I'm afraid to say. Use it as it is correctly on your card. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the man at the center of the global network, a key person to today's gathering, Dave Kaplan, to make opening remarks. Thank you.
That was Anton Harbour. He didn't say who he was. He is from the WITS journalism program, one of our esteemed members here in Africa of GIJN, and part of the reason you are all here. This is a co-hosted event between the WITS journalism program and the Global Investigative Journalism Network, of which I'm proud to be its manager. Wow, we have worked for a year to bring you all together. We do these conferences only once every 2 years. It's a lot of work. Journalists are kind of demanding. You want things just right. You all want to do other travel. You've got sources, stories, and lots of things to do. We understand that. Listen, we're just so proud and delighted to have set the table for you, and you're the ones who really make this thing happen. This is our 10th conference. The global conferences began in 2001. Our two co-founders, Brant Houston and Nils Mulvad, were having a glass of wine after a workshop and said, gee, next year, why don't we try and bring the whole world together? And they tried, and they didn't know if anyone would come. 300 people from 30 countries came, and it was like a religious revival. Journalists found out that even though they were from different cultures, different countries, they had the same problems. They couldn't get access to information. They had questions about how to use the latest technology. They were being spied on, intimidated, sued, beaten up, murdered. when they came together, they realized that we're not alone. They realized the bad guys had gone international a long time ago, and it was finally time that the good guys started catching up. The bad guys can move money and people and contraband literally at the push of a button without accountability. How do we link up? How do we network? How do we share our sources and ideas and techniques? Well, the global conference took off, and this is our as I said, our 10th one, our first time in Africa. I'm going to do a lot of thank youing. I won't talk that long, don't worry, because we've got an incredible plenary panel for you ready to go. But for starters, let me ask our co-founders, Brand Houston, Nils, I see you, Nils Molvad, you guys stand up. Let's give them a quick round of applause, because we wouldn't be here without them. A couple years after that first conference, the global network was formed, and it was a loose affiliation of like-minded groups who wanted to spread and strengthen investigative journalism around the world. And then in 2011, at our conference in Kiev, Ukraine, we decided we would form a nonprofit because we were getting so many requests for help and conferences and workshops and how to share information and tools and techniques. So we created GIJN, the nonprofit. We now have 10 staff on 4 continents. We publish in 5 languages every day. This conference is being covered in 7 languages. What you folks do and say and network here is going out in Arabic and Chinese, Spanish, French, German, English, Russian. So we really have gone global in a remarkable way. A lot has happened since the last time we came together 2 years ago. We had a great conference in Lillehammer, Norway. We have even more people in more countries this time, which is extraordinary. We weren't sure how many of you would come to the tip of Africa. And look at this. We're 1,000 strong, actually about 1,200, 130 countries. Wow. Since Lillehammer, the movie Spotlight came out, and it showed how a single investigative team could change the course of history and expose pedophile priests in 100 countries. The movie went viral and was shown everywhere, and it demonstrated how important accountability watchdog reporting is. The Panama Papers happened. Showed how a team helmed by a small nonprofit in one country could help coordinate 400 journalists from 100 outlets, keep secrets for a whole year, and change the entire global debate on our financial system. Brexit happened. We started seeing a flood of misinformation, propaganda, and fake news that has affected the fate of the European Union. Donald Trump happened. Don't get me started. I'll let David K. Johnston deal with that one. But it showed that something extraordinary is going on, that we're facing a global backlash against the things we hold dear: transparency, a free and independent news media, the ability to hold our leaders and those with power in our societies accountable. Well, as you might have heard me say at the reception last night, we're the backlash against the backlash. People are getting together as never before to do this kind of journalism, and it's just amazing. We have more journalists doing more investigative work in more countries with better tools against tougher targets than ever before. And this is despite all the lawsuits and the threats and the murders and the repressive tactics. And it's because, I'm still an optimist, everyone, it's because we're on the right side of history. If you want to participate in the global market, if you want your society to grow, if you want your people to have advantages as you move forward, you have to open up. You have to be accountable. You have to have books that show what your businesses are really doing. You can't have a system that runs on fraud and abuses of power. And it's why we're on the right side of history, and it's why we are growing almost everywhere. This conference is for you. It was designed and staffed by working journalists. We're unique because this is a giant training conference. You know, our speakers and moderators, we drive them crazy because we say we really don't care about, you know, speakers' egos or their last stories. We want to know about how they did their last stories, about what tips and techniques and tools they used. We care about the story, finding it, reporting it, proving it. Investigative journalism has always been political. It's because we care about accountability, about stopping abuses of power, exploitation. We care about human rights. That's why in so many countries they treat us, as Donald Trump has put it, enemies of the people. Sometimes we're just trying to ask why people can't get decent medical care, or why their tax money and savings are being stolen by fraud and greed. You'll see a lot of panels. About a third of our panels focus on data in various aspects, and it's not because we like pie charts and graphics so much. That's not the data journalism that we're really, well, it's part of it, but what we're really looking at is using data as an investigative tool. It's part of our toolkit. Our co-founder, Bran Houston, likes to call investigative reporting the R&D department of journalism. It was investigative reporters in the 1980s who looked at big IBM mainframe computers and punch cards and said, you know, those are public records. How can we do our own analysis of that? That's where computer-assisted reporting came from. You'll see extraordinary people like Branton Nils and Janina Sanini and John Bones. These data journalists are training their third generation of data journalists around the world, and check out the work they're doing. It's amazing. Okay, I've got some thank yous to do. This conference is not possible without a lot of outside support. We spend a lot of time fundraising. It's not the easiest job, but we brought over 300 journalists here from developing and transitioning countries on fellowships, and our partners and member organizations probably brought another 300. So I want to run through a list of thank yous, then I'll turn it back over to Anton. Actually, first let me back up, and I want to thank our staffs who worked so hard to make this happen. Can we get the VITS and GIJN staffs to stand? And come on, folks. GIJN and VITS, thank you. You guys kicked ass. Okay, our donors. Thank you, Open Society Foundations. GIJN and the Global Conference would not be here without your foresight and your steady support. You've been with us from the beginning. Special shout out to our partner and longtime member, Scoop, in Norway, which brings in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who has also supported us for years. We have brought literally hundreds of journalists to this conference because of them. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung similarly has helped us all over the world, not just on the global conference, but here. GIJN's other core funders, the Odessium Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Oak Foundation. We had support for our workshops yesterday. We did our first workshop on investigative reporting on LGBTQ issues. It went great. Thank you, the Arcus Foundation. We did a great workshop on human trafficking and forced labor. Thank you, Humanity United. The MacArthur Foundation helped us bring journalists from Nigeria here by the plane load. Thank you so much. Here in Africa, the Valley Trust, Eyewitness News, Sanlam, E-News Channel Africa, the Bloomberg Media Initiative Africa. Thanks so much. Other foundations helped out, the Democracy and Media Foundation, the Logan Foundation, Google News Lab and Twitter both pitched in. And now those are sort of our foundation and institutional backers. Now here are all of our members and partners, groups like GIJN, our member organizations who have all contributed either by sending people here or helping us financially. The International Women's Media Foundation, the International Center for Journalists, ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, IRE, Investigative Reporters and Editors, the DART Center for Journalism and Trauma, journalismfund.eu, Waseda Chronicle in Japan, Newstapa in Korea, Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. You hear how diverse this list is? This has truly become a global movement. In India, Cobra Post and India Spend, SSE Riga, the Center for Media Studies at the Stockholm School of Economics, the UN ODC, the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, and Canozo, Free Press Unlimited, Columbia University, Frey Intermedia, the Social Justice Initiative, IREX, the African Investigative Publishing Collective, International Media Support, based in Denmark, Africa Check, the Tanzania Media Foundation. I'm almost done, stay with me. Deutsche Welle, Witz Justice Project, ANSWER, African Network of Centers of Investigative Reporting, Media 24, Code for Africa, Mission Investigative from Swedish Public Television, and South Africa's own Ama Bungane. Thank you so much. Can you give them a round of applause? This wouldn't happen without all of you. This is a team effort, and you can see how broad and international the sources of support are. Okay, a couple of quick notes to help you get the most out of the conference. The conference sold out to feed you all and find enough hotels and put you all in this auditorium. We had to cap it. So listen, the smaller rooms, some of the data labs and smaller classrooms may fill up quickly. So if you really want to go to these, get there early or on time. Remember that our schedule is designed as a big buffet. Okay, in some cultures you go in and you sit down and you stay there till the workshop is over. You don't have to do that here. This is a big smorgasbord. You go in, you sample it. If you like what you see, stay. If you don't, there are 10 other sessions at the same time. Open the seat up to someone else. Find something that really interests you. We've designed a lot of networking time. There are 10 informal networking sessions. You can go in, introduce yourself, talk about your stories, and find collaboration partners, brainstorm. That's what they're there for. There's also a lot of time between sessions. This is an experiment this year, and it's so you have time to talk to the speakers and your colleagues there, have a cup of coffee, and network. We've had incredible stories come out of these conferences, and the action is often in the hallways and over a cup of coffee or a drink at a reception, and we get that. So have at it. Our conference hashtag, GIJC17, was trending yesterday. Please use it. We want this to go far and wide. Finally, please wear your badges. You'll need it to get into the sessions and eat lunch. And above all, have a great time. We are so happy that you folks are here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. I just want to add to the housekeeping list. Yes, please wear your badges at all times. Security has been asked to stop anyone who is not, so please cooperate with them. Please be aware too that it's exam time at the university. We've tried to keep our key venues away from the key exam areas. But if you're wandering around what is a lovely campus, please bear in mind that this is the big exam season of the year, and you will see that going on. Please be aware of security. Please be cautious about walking the streets at night alone, in particular, carrying equipment. You don't need to be paranoid, but you do need to be careful. And your hotel will advise you if you need it. But please do think carefully about being out alone, particularly at night on the streets. Even within the university and in the venue, please do not leave your things lying around. Laptops do disappear. So please keep a tight hold on anything you lose. All lost and found will be handed in at the registration desk. So go there if you lose something. You know how packed the schedule is. So we have to run on time. If we don't run on time, we're going to run into trouble. So we're going to be as firm as we can be on starting every session on time, ending every session on time. So please assist us with that. If you're a speaker, please make sure you're at your venue half an hour before, and any material presentations are uploaded ready for you. But regardless, we're going to start on time and keep moving. Otherwise, we will be here till the middle of next Wednesday. Friday night's performance of the legendary Muckrakers at the Orbit Jazz Club. The Orbit can only take 400 people max. So it's first come, first served. Based on registering on the online SCED program. So please, the first 400 people who click that button will be those expected there, and after that we just can't take more. You know, the combination of too many people and the Muckrakers, we have to be a little bit careful. Let me end by saying that our team, our quite large team, you have seen in orange t-shirts. They're there to help you. Medical people, security people are on quick call. So if you have any queries, any issues, any concerns, please find them and they will either assist you or take you to somebody who will assist you. We're here to make this as smooth and as easy as possible. So please don't hesitate to draw any issues or problems to my attention. Okay, I'm very eager to hand over to Ferry Al-Hafaji to run the panel. I'll ask him to come up. Let me briefly introduce Ferial. Ferial is a graduate of this university, and since she left this university, we've worked together many times over many years. She started as an intern, a trainee on a newspaper. We worked together for many years, and she rose to edit that newspaper. And as an editor, an internationally known editor, and certainly one of South Africa's best known, most experienced editors. So you're in very good hands this morning. Ferial.
I'm in search of Roman, Anin. Aha. So good morning, everybody. My name's Ferial. It's lovely to be with you. This great hall has hosted some pretty cool crowds, but never have I seen such a wonderful group of troublemakers and the world's worst nightmares gathered under a single roof. So a wonderful man, and I'll tell you who he is in a little while. said that a critical, independent, and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. He added, free press that can have the capacity to relentlessly expose excesses and corruption on the part of government, state officials, and other institutions will hold power to account in society. So all of us regularly quote these words by Nelson Mandela at every journalism gathering. But this year, they are so very true in South Africa, where persistent, fearless, troublesome, painstaking investigative journalism has drawn a very clear anatomy of all that pains our young democracy. It's been a masterclass for me to watch, for us to watch every single day, and it's as it has brought truths that's kept us on the edge of our seats. So there are many. So it's made rock stars of muckrakers, or dung beetles, as our local crew have called themselves. This panel is called Reporting in the Time of Autocrats, and our President Jacob Zuma takes a very comfortable seat, I'm sad and heartbroken to say, with the generation of populist demagogues or democratators who run ostensible democracies, but who are distorting them with trolls, with their huge budgets for misinformation, with cronyism, with armies, and with the corruption that can bleed the developmental dream. Yet, all of you and our panel here continues to do that work in trying and dangerous times. All our colleagues here are multi-award-winning journalists. I'm not going to read long CVs because I want them to tell you their stories. And they come from countries where autocrats or potential autocrats hold sway. So I am going to start right at home by asking Tandukolo Jika, who is a leading South African investigative journalist with the Sunday Times. He's been trawling through our version of the Panama Papers, unveiling layers and layers and layers of illegal financial flows, dodgy procurement, cronyism, and more. So Jika, how difficult is it to work in the time of President Zuma? Why does nothing happen? Why is nobody in jail? I'm going to come sit among you.
I really wish I could, good morning everyone. I really wish I could answer the part where, why is no one in jail? But from where I'm sitting, it is clear that he has managed to infiltrate or influence every part of the state with people that are sympathetic towards him or compromised individuals. Actually, it's more like compromised individuals who are prepared to defend President Jacob Zuma and his questionable dealings with his friends, the Gupta family, and of course, and his son. It's been quite a challenge for us in South Africa, especially in the past 3 years. We've been called regime change agents who are sponsored because of simply telling a story of how our state coffers have been ripped apart and have been looted by those close to power in general, and how they actually have paralyzed state-owned entities, how they have paralyzed government itself, effectively, leading us into an economy that is struggling to grow. It's been quite a challenge in many facets, because at the same time you don't only become a target. I can tell you every Sunday we became targets of social media attacks. Our sources in many places, there was a lot of witch hunt. A lot of good officials have lost their jobs. We've had to find, new innovative ways to do investigative journalism, how you get documents, how you actually protect your sources, thanks to the internet as well, that we've been, not only the internet, technology, that we've been able to find new applications that we use to actually, try and push hard on telling what those in power don't want many people to know.
It works now. So my name is Roman Anin, and I'm actually here to substitute my colleague Jelena Milashina from Nova Gazeta, and that is why I'll spend my time on promoting her stories, and because she's really a great and very brave investigative reporter. In Nova Gazeta, this is probably the last, as we are called, oppositional newspaper in Russia, but I don't like the word oppositional, but still we are the last, I would say, impartial newspaper in Russia. One of the few. And in our newspaper, the most important sections have the names of our reporters who were killed. So I am the head of the section which has the name of Yuri Shikachikhin. He is considered to be the father of investigative reporting in Russia, and he was poisoned because he reported about secret services in Russia. And Yelena Milashina is the head of the section which has the name of Anna Politkovskaya. Anna Politkovskaya is one of the most famous Russian journalists, and she was killed in 2006. She was shot down in near her apartment, and she was by that time probably the only reporter in Russia who did stories about Chechen authorities. She did stories about human rights in Chechen Republic, about corruption of Chechen authorities, about war crimes, and many, many others. And after Anna Politkovskaya was killed, there was a kind of gap because nobody reported about Chechnya. And I want to be honest, reporting about Putin, which let's say I do and my section does, is quite safe. But reporting Kadyrov, the head of Chechen Republic, is really dangerous. So it's a kind of a one-way ticket. And Yelena Milashina does it, and she actually, she's the only reporter in our country who does it. And this year she did two shocking stories, which shocked not only my country but the whole world. She did the stories about assassinations of gays in the Chechen Republic. So she was able to actually prove that 30, if I'm not mistaken, gays were actually killed in prison, in Chechen prison, and hundreds were tortured. And as the result of this reporting, 70 people were able to get visas and escape from Chechen Republic. And of course, Chechen authorities, they deny everything, and they say that in our society there are no gays, and that is why there is nobody to torture. The investigative committee is afraid of Chechen authorities, and that is why it doesn't want to start any criminal case. And when we, give them proofs that, look, these people were killed and you can find the body there and there, they don't react. And what they actually even did, because after the story was published, the human rights activists came to Chechen Republic, and in order to prove that people were not killed, the Chechen authorities presented their brothers, saying that, look, these people are alive, and we were able to prove then that they presented wrong people. Talking about how she reports about these kind of dangerous issues, of course, safety is number one issue in such stories. And since we are quite experienced in our newspaper in providing safety to our reporters, we do a lot to protect Yelena, and not only Yelena, but other reporters who work in Chechen Republic and so on. And of course, we care a lot about techniques we use. Let's say the informational security is very important because when you do stories about Chechen Republic, you know, you gotta use those services which allow you to communicate with people without connecting to their phone numbers. So, and this is really important because many Chechen gays were actually killed and were found by authorities because they took their phones and found their messages to their lovers or to, you know, to some other people. And that is why, being a reporter, you gotta know, you know, how to provide safety for this kind of, for these people and for these stories. Because these are stories which can't be done online, right? So these are stories where you can't get records from online databases. These stories are based only on physical sources in the region. Yeah, the outcome is that there is still no criminal case, but at least 70 people were saved and are now safe in Europe, thanks to just one embassy. Actually, you know, many European embassies didn't want to provide them visas, which is kind of cool when European states say that they do care about human rights. You know, when it comes to doing something, not all of them are doing this, and just one embassy actually provided those visas to those poor people. So no criminal case, but at least, you know, some people are safe.
So I'm very, very happy that you're here because I just didn't see if I get the name right. Novaya Gazeta in Russia is a very famous campaigning, decorated media title. But it's also a very dangerous one because 9 of your fellow colleagues have been killed through the years. Is that correct? No?
No, not 9. These are six reporters. Actually, 4 reporters who were staff of Novaya Gazeta. And I'll mention their names because I think it's important. It's Yuri Shikachyhin. He was investigating secret services, and he was poisoned. Then Igor Dominikov, who was, he covered regional authorities, and he was beaten, he was killed by an organized crime gang from a region. And actually we were able to find the guy who ordered the assassination. This was the governor of the region, and he was not even sentenced because a lot of time passed, and you know, then Anna Politkovskaya, Anastasia Baburova, she was killed by neo-Nazis. She was a very young reporter. She was just 24 or 25, if I'm not mistaken. And then 2 others, they were not members of our staff, but they did a lot of stories for us. So one was Natalia Estemirova. She reported about Chechen authorities, and she was shot down in Chechnya. And her body was found in Ingushetia. And the 6th one is Stanislav Markelov. He was the lawyer who provided a lot of legal help to Chechen authorities, to anti-fascists, and he did a lot of job for us, for the newspaper. And he was shot down together with Anastasia Baburova by neo-Nazis in the center of Moscow, so 6 people.
Still 6 too many. So our next speaker is David K. Johnston, who is the editor-in-chief of the dcreport.org. He's been a writer and editor for 50 years, and he's written the now best-selling The Making of Donald Trump, and coming up in January is a title called It's Worse Than You Think. So why would Kim Jong-un insult me by calling me old when I would never call him short and fat? I try so hard to be his friend. Discuss.
Well, I always address the current president of the United States as Donald, since I know him. I'm glad all of you are here, and I want to try and offer some practical advice on how to cover autocratic governments, or as we have in America, a would-be dictator, who, given the opportunity, will absolutely do what we saw in Rome in 69 AD and suspend the Constitution. First and foremost, you got to remember the basics. We are the only occupation where we are paid to tell the truth. If your doctor tells you, I'm sorry, you have this horrible disease, you're going to die in 6 weeks, he may be telling you the truth, but he's paid to diagnose and treat you. We are the only people paid to tell the truth. And as investigative reporters, we are paid to uncover the hidden truths and the unofficial events, and that is the highest and most important calling. Now, even in a police state, governments have to leave a record of what they are doing in order to operate. For example, 6 years ago, when I was the global economics columnist for Reuters, I revealed that Singapore, described in news reports all around the world as the lowest tax country in the world, is actually the highest tax country in the world. It has a stealth tax, and journalists could have known this if they had just compared different reports the government had. One on how much money people put into the retirement fund, and the other on how much was paid out. An American writer in the 1900s, Edgar Allan Poe, wrote a story that all journalists should appreciate called The Purloined Letter. A group of Belgian detectives are trying to find a stolen letter. They go through an office, they take everything apart. The letter's lying right on the desk in front of them. Many of the best stories are actually right there, but you have to see them. Governments have to communicate to those who carry out their orders what they want to do. And if somebody says, well, I can't print you a copy of that email, there'd be a record of it. Well, maybe you could shoot a picture of the screen with your cell phone and show it to me. Think about creative ways. Think about documents that may be in another country. When I was lecturing in China one year and business journalists complained they couldn't get records, I put up on a screen like this behind me a Chinese company in the city I was lecturing in with its 10 biggest customers and their revenues from the 10 biggest customers and the share of the company's total income from these customers, because it had been filed in the United States with the American Securities and Exchange Commission, who are the Wall Street police. There are court records. There are records of land transfers. There are foreign records, and you need to develop all the skill you can to find and understand these records. Now, one of the things that's most helpful is whatever it is you're trying to learn about, try to learn it at the level of principle and theory, not the mechanical level. And as a simple example of that, if you were assigned tomorrow to cover policing in your country, the very first thing I would urge you to do is go to a library and read up on, well, where did policing come from? It doesn't exist in the ethers. Human beings had to think it up. How did they think it up? How did it develop? How did it develop in different cultures? What drives it, and what is the current policing people in your jurisdiction? What is it that they are being taught? And you will begin to see things. Secondly, recognize that little people, clerks, janitors, secretaries, can be among your very best sources. They're used to being ignored, they're often privy to conversations, and they may be antagonistic to the actions of an autocratic government. They can be very important and useful sources. Third, next, be sure when you have a document that you vet it, that you know it's legitimate. I once was given a document when I was writing about the Los Angeles Police Department and exposing its misconduct in the LA Times that was so juicy and it was so good, I just said to myself, this can't be real. And years later, I found out that the police chief had arranged to have multiple copies of a memo raid with slightly different wording, handed them out to different senior police officers to figure out who was talking to me. Luckily, I never quoted the document directly. But you have to vet the document. When I got Donald Trump's 2005 tax return in the mail, the White House verified it. You need to be able to vet documents and know that they're real. And finally, be absolutely fair to the most awful people. Treat them as fairly as the people you like the most, because it will strengthen the power and the impact of what you do if people say, boy, they're really trying to be fair to this monster over here. And be fearless. You know, the only thing they can do is lock you up or kill you. And many of you live in countries where journalism is a crime. I used to sit next to a man at the LA Times who had been a journalist in what was then Rhodesia, and he kept his death warrant on his desk. And when I was made his desk mate, I said, well, what crime did you commit that you could be shot on sight? Journalism. Do what you need to do and don't be afraid. Don't ever flinch. If they know you won't flinch, you're going to get different treatment, and other people will respect and admire your work. They will send you things. They will send you information. So learn things, principle and theory. Pay attention to little people who know things like secretaries and clerks. When people say, I can't get you a document, think about creative ways to do it, like shooting a picture on a cell phone that you can then delete. Vet the documents and be suspicious of a document that's just too good to be true. Be completely fair, no matter how bad someone is behaving, and never flinch.
Thank you very much. Never flinch. Can I ask you something? So if President Trump keeps up with calling the media fake news, the constant attacks, the tweets, does it have a chilling effect on investigative journalism, or has it made journalists more persistent?
Well, before the election, American journalists did a horrible job. Americans voted for a president not knowing that he'd had 2 tax trials for tax cheating and lost both, that he confessed to tax cheating, that for years he was deeply involved with a major international drug trafficker, and that there is no logical explanation for Donald Trump's actions with this drug trafficker unless he was in business with him. And yet, didn't appear on any of the TV networks in America, didn't appear in any of the major newspapers unless you read my work and others, all from the public, a few other people, all from the public record, you would have no idea. Since his election, there has been quite a change. And we have seen particularly the Washington Post under Marty Baron, who was formerly an editor at the New York Times, and the New York Times under Dean Baquet, as well as the AP, the Associated Press, the Wall Street Journal somewhat, Bloomberg somewhat, and Politico somewhat, do very aggressive coverage. Where they are failing is that they spend too much time covering the palace intrigues. They are not doing what we do at my little tiny organization, DC Report. We go to the official record and cover what the government does. So when the Trump administration stops posting worker deaths in worker accidents, it gets ignored by everybody else. We report that, because if you want to know what your leaders are doing, I don't care much about what they say. That's what they want you to know. I care about what they're doing, and there's a paper trail of that. So, but overall, since the election, much better coverage, and yes, there's a clear effort to intimidate, and there is a large segment of Americans who believe, sincerely believe, that Donald Trump is a virtual god, that he is their savior economically. And the irony for me of this is that Donald Trump ran for president on the economics I laid out in a series of best-selling books.
Thank you very much. So in South Africa, a best-selling book that's even outsold Harry Potter, which is huge here. It's by Jacques Spokal, The President's Keeper, has also unveiled the President's tax affairs. And that's what Jika and I will speak about a little bit more. Nothing has happened about that, even though it's all out there in the open. So we're going to go to India now, where the Modi regime is really challenging India's homespun freedom of media and free expression. We should tip our hats to the journalist Gauri Lankesh, who was killed in Bangalore in September. So Ritu Saran, is it more difficult to do the kind of cross-border investigations you are so well known for in these times?
Yeah, I'll just come to that. The news is, of course, that India finds a place on this panel. And
it is unusual.
Yeah, no. And I'm happy you used the term in your introduction of potential autocrat. But what I want to say is that all governments, in India before the present government, and all governments everywhere hate criticism, and they love to boast about the work they do. But having said that, things have changed in India since the present government, headed by Mr. Narendra Modi, has come about 3 years ago. And what we are seeing now is a very opaque system where the rules of engagement for the media have definitely changed, and things are happening which we certainly haven't been used to. So what you are seeing is a rise of the charismatic leader. The Prime Minister, no doubt, is a charismatic leader, and one who uses the social media to his advantage. And he has about 36 million followers on Twitter, and huge armies on social media backing him. And they don't follow the rules of journalism as we are required to. And they hit back in a very vitriolic manner like never before. So we are seeing all sorts of things happen, like for example, if we have a clarification published in the paper, the minister will not stop short of highlighting it and putting it on his Twitter handle. These are things that never happened before, and they will not stop short of embarrassing you. The Prime Minister himself does not have a conversation with the media. And it's very evident 3 years down the line that the media is treated like an irritant, The Prime Minister used to always, the Indian Prime Minister, carry a troop of journalists, a large group of journalists on the plane. Presently, that is not happening from the time this government came to power. And it's important because on the plane, you get to ask the Prime Minister, on each leg of the trip, you can ask him whatever you want. So that's been done away with. The annual press conference that the Prime Minister would give has been done away with. The Prime Minister did have conversations off the record with a group of journalists when he came to power, but that was some time back. He speaks a lot when he goes abroad, and he speaks through social media. There is no conversation with the Prime Minister. Other things are happening. We are seeing a government that, can I prove it? I don't think so, but all sorts of things are being leaked. I may be chasing a story for months, and suddenly I see a TV anchor wave confidential documents, and I say, hey, I know she doesn't have the sources in the income tax department. So to embarrass members of the earlier ruling party, you are seeing all, secret files, documents, even from the Central Bureau of Investigation or the income tax, and rather systematically, and I wonder whether there is really a machine behind it. And it's something we should be looking at. Now, in a situation like this, what has the media done? Because following the Prime Minister, a lot of other leaders, Rahul Gandhi of the Congress, say the UP Chief Minister, the West Bengal Chief Minister, they're all taking to the social media and withdrawing from the media or a one-on-one conversation themselves. They are mirroring him. Now, what has the media done? Unfortunately, a section of the media, a rather large section, has stopped asking questions. The government wants to run and to talk through press releases and handouts, and several journalists are happy with that. So I think in India, the phase for routine journalism, for beat journalism, the space is getting reduced. And in fact, we've come to a time when the space for investigative journalism is really getting enlarged. And we have to beat them at their own game, in the sense we have to investigate their schemes, we have to investigate the figures, the data that they are putting out, and we cannot go wrong. Accuracy, because if we go wrong, they are not going to stop short at embarrassing you. So we have to use the RTI much more, and we have to, of course, get back to fieldwork, to reporting. India is a very large country. We have to go to the states, we have to go to the institutions, because the government sees the functioning of all institutions, and including the media, through their electoral prism. If you criticize them, the answer they have is that the people have voted us to power. So in the Indian Express also, we have made a decision that we have to find ways of getting into a story and not getting out of a story. And I can give you some examples. We have done some good stories on government schemes. My colleague Shamlal Yadav is here. He did a very fine story on the Jan Dhan scheme. This was a government scheme where they want to open accounts, bank accounts for poor people. But we could prove, and the Prime Minister boasted, that don't think these accounts are empty, they've got money in them. And we could prove by traveling all over the states that the bank managers employed people to fill 1 rupee in these accounts. Now, who would put a 1 rupee deposit or a 2 rupee deposit? So we called it the 1 rupee trick, and proved that just to puck up the figures, 1 rupee had been deposited in hundreds, lakhs of cases into these bank accounts. There was also demonetization. We did a lot of stories to prove that actually it was the government that recommended to the Reserve Bank of India to have demonetization. And several other stories like that. So this is the time to get back to old-fashioned investigative journalism and make sure you don't go wrong. So in the end, if I feel the environment in India is stifling or it's dangerous, I would say not. But if you ask me, is it challenging, is it invigorating, and is it a fertile ground for investigative journalism, I'll say yes.
Thank you so much. So Ewald Schaffenberg is from Venezuela, and I have to tell you that in South Africa, Chavismo, we really believe still, many political parties, in the Venezuelan example. Yet we see every day that Bolivarian revolution coming apart quite spectacularly. And Ewald is going to talk to us about it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I prepared some slides. I hope it won't be boring for you, yeah? And I also would like to apologize for my bad English. I try to do my best. Yes, my name is Ewald Scharfenberg. Despite my German name, I'm a Venezuelan reporter, born and raised in Venezuela. And actually, I'm here to say some words about what it's like to do investigative journalism in Venezuela under the conditions of the Bolivarian Revolution or the Chavista regime. Yep. And in order to do so, I want to make a couple of questions, because I want to highlight that we are not facing in Venezuela a traditional autocracy. Yeah? We are facing another kind of creature. So let's say that, first of all, that we have no journalists in prison right now in Venezuela. We are not like other countries in the region, and we don't have any journalists killed in Venezuela. We are not Mexico. We are not even Honduras, where, you know, murdering journalists is almost everyday activity. Yeah. No, we are not like this. Yep. So some of you could be wondering at this point, well, so why are we talking about Venezuela right now? But what I'm trying to establish, my point is that we are facing a new kind of regime, yeah? That maybe autocracies are going to be more, they are going to be smarter from now on. They are not going to be the traditional guerrilla regime, as we call them in South America. It's another kind of regime, yeah? It's the case of the Bolivarian Revolution, yeah, or the Chavista Revolution, whatever you want to call it. Actually, many experts have been trying to find a definition of what kind of regime is the Venezuelan one. Is it a kleptocracy with a huge popular support? Is it what they call a competitive autocracy? Is it what we call in Latin America a caudillismo? A caudillo is a Spanish word for a strong man, yeah? And well, maybe it's none of these definitions fits to what is happening in Venezuela. Well, in terms of freedom of press and freedom of expressions, it's the same situation. Yeah? It's not the traditional South American dictatorship. It's not, as I say at this slide, it's not like Fahrenheit 451. It's not about burning books and shutting down media. No, it's a more subtle process. Yeah? It's more about 1984. It's about controlling minds, controlling wills. Yeah, it's for pushing for a unique official truth. Yeah, which is the only one that can be spread. Yeah, and that's what's happening in Venezuela. I would like to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. Yeah? First one is the anti-hate law, which was passed last week by the Chavista Constituent Assembly. It was especially conceived to control media outlets, but also the social networks. I don't know if you know that now in Venezuela, Twitter, especially Twitter, is the main source of information for our citizens. Yeah? So the government is eager to control social networks, and finally passed this law last week that, for instance, has penalties up to 20 years in prison if a government office found that you publish a hate message in social networks or media outlets. Yeah? So it's an example of what this kind of government is doing. The second example, is about well, something that involves myself. Yeah? The investigative reporting I run in Venezuela has been sued by the middleman of President Maduro. Yeah? And once I go back to my country from here, I am facing the risk of go to prison for 6 years because we have been sued by defamation and injury. It's a crime in Venezuela. It has penalty up to 6 years in prison. And to make it short, let me explain that the story is the following. The guy with the black tie at the upper left corner of the picture has sued us because we published a story proving that he is the one who is controlling the company that export food from Mexico to Venezuela. You know that we are facing a terrible scarcity of food now in Venezuela. We are almost starving, and the food business is controlled by the government. And this guy, Alex Saab, is the one who controls the business on behalf of government. Well, we discovered that, we proved that, and this guy sued us due to that. And the outcome of this trial is already made. Yeah, the judge is a Chavista one. She has never ruled against the government in 20 years. Yeah, the plaintiff's lawyer plays domino, you know this play with President Maduro. Maduro is very close to him, so we are doomed, we could say. Yep. Well, and our government used another subtle mechanism to control the press. I don't want to bore you explaining each of one. What I'm trying to establish is that this kind of regimes are not using the same and traditional tools to control journalism. And finally, I would like to mention some lessons I think we have learned during our reporting under the Chavista regime that I can recall and share as maybe as some advice for colleagues that are facing a situation like that. The first one is an ironic one, is that this kind of governments trying to make all a secret are expanding the field of investigative journalism. I don't know if you understand me. For example, in Venezuela, the government used to publish every week a report on homicides and criminality figures, yeah? But since 2005, President Chavez forbid or prohibited to spread this report. Yeah? So from then on, this information became a subject for investigative reporting. So ironically, this kind of regime bring the possibility, the opportunity to have a golden era of investigative journalism. Yeah? I understand it is an irony, but that's right. The second lesson is, my colleague David said that it is very important to have access to foreign documents and even better to a foreign ally. Yeah? Not only in terms of reporting, because it is important to follow documents about our governors abroad. You know, our corrupts don't steal money or public funds in order to keep it safe under their mattresses. Yeah, they are not trying to save for their kids, but they want to buy a condo in Miami, or they want to buy a aircraft in Delaware, or open a bank account in Panama. So there are always traces in foreign archives. No? But also in terms of publishing, if you have a very hot issue, maybe if you share it with an ally that it can publish it in safer condition, well, it would be very important. In the third place, when we have to give off this traditional lone wolf attitude of journalists. Yeah? We are dwarfs struggling against this giant, which is the government. So if we add our abilities and skills, maybe we can find huge stories. Yeah? And another important lesson we have learned is that in that kind of regimes, it is important to understand the system of loyalties that base these regimes. Yeah? You know, these personalistic regimes always relies on personal loyalties. Yeah? And once in a while, the autocrat want to put into test his men. Yeah? And these are opportunities when the loyalties relax, you know, weakens, and it's an opportunity to find sources within the regime, yeah, which is not very easy regularly. And finally, it's important to never show yourself vulnerable, you know, in front of this kind of regime, because they smell when you are scared, they smell when you are afraid. So if they smell that, well, they are going to take advantage of that. So I know it's very difficult, but you have to be brave and have courage to go on. Thank you.
Extraordinarily brave when you face a 6-year, almost inevitable jail term. We'll come back to that. Thank you very much, Ewald. So Patricia Evangelista is from Rappler, which is making ripples and waves around the world, a media platform in the Philippines. What's it like to work in a time of Duterte? It looks like madness. Welcome, Patricia.
Well, I'd like to start with a story. Or at least with a promise of Duterte. See, when it all began, he made, like any politician, several promises. He said the fishes will feed fat on the corpses of criminals. He said morticians will grow rich with a deluge of dead. He said that the police will be protected from punishment, and his chief promised or suggested the burning of houses. He said, before he was elected, kill them all. That was his promise. When I become president, I will ask the police and the military to find these people and kill them. Now, there are many and varied ways the president describes the people he would prefer killed. They're addicts that he said were involved in horrendous, despicable crimes of murder and rape. He said they are the meth users whose shrunken brains make rehabilitation no longer viable. He said they're the people who gave the public license to kill. If you know of any addicts, he said, go ahead and kill them yourselves, as getting their parents to do it would be too painful. Essentially, he said, if they pull out a gun, kill them. If they don't, kill them anyway, son of a whore. Lest you lose the gun, I'll take care of you. I'll tell you a story. Once upon a time, which is the only good and proper way to begin a story. Once upon a time, there was a mother and a father who lived in a cinder block house with their 6 children in the slums. One day, the police came and arrested the mother. When the father found out, he ran away because he knew that the police would come back and kill them. They said that they were drug dealers. He came back anyway because it was the birthday of one of his children. So that morning he made breakfast and they were happy and they were laughing, and he told all his 6 children to take care of each other because Papa would have to go away again. Then there was shouting outside and 3 gun barrels through the window, and the police kicked open the door and they pushed the father into the couch, head down, knees on the cushion, with the hand of a cop behind the back of his neck. And then they told all the children to get out of the house, except for one, because the 12-year-old threw herself beside her father, wrapped her arms around him, and wouldn't let go. So they grabbed her and then threw her against the wall, and they said, "Get out." Except she didn't get out fast enough. And she said she was there when they shot her father. Shot him through the back of his head, shot him through the chest, shot him so close that the next day her 4-year-old brother dug out the bullet from the back of the couch. It took a long time for the girl to start talking again. When she began speaking, she apologized. She said sorry to her siblings, and she said sorry to her grandmother. She said sorry because it was her fault. She said sorry because had she held her father tighter, had she hugged him harder, Papa wouldn't be dead. On a police spot report, that man, the 12-year-old's father, is reported as a scavenger who was neutralized by police personnel for fighting back during a police encounter. He is now one of 9,964 drug suspects who were killed after allegedly drawing guns against the police in the last year and a half. We do not know the exact number of those killed by armed men on the streets. We call them vigilante killings, extrajudicial killings, deaths under investigation. There are many names. Occasionally, they're shot on the street by armed men and motorcycles. Sometimes their bodies are found at corners. In the worst cases, they're found with their ankles tied, their hands bound, and their heads wrapped in packing tape. There are signs beside them that say user, drug dealer, addict. Sometimes there are jokes, sometimes there are witticisms. Manila is a place where murder has been reduced to a meme. In one particular case, the body was turned over, face down, the head was wrapped in tape. When the journalists came and the cops turned the body over, somebody had taken the same marking pen and drew a happy face over the face of the suffocated dead man. At the height of the killings, the international community said certain things. They said it might be crimes against humanity. My president, His Excellency Rodrigo Duterte, said, in the first place, I'd like to be frank with you. Are they humans? What is your definition of a human being? So the Secretary of Justice was more categorical. The criminals, the drug lords, the drug pushers, they are not the humanity. Now we're used to casualty counts in my country. 12 civilians killed in a hostage crisis in the South, 32 journalists dead in the single worst attack against journalists anywhere in the world, 6,500 corpses in the worst typhoon in history. The reason I say this is because we're used to statistics. And our jobs as trauma journalists in the Philippines is to put faces and names to the numbers. I thought that if we made the public imagine, if we could make them see past the numbers, that's when we can chase after accountability, for as long as we can make the public care. But see, now when we humanize the dead, we're told we're no longer patriots. When we report witness testimony or contradictory evidence, we're fake news. And when we say the dead died badly, when we cover the funerals and the weeping mothers, when we name the policemen who swagger down the alleys, screaming they are executioners, we are told that the dead were drug dealers and that they deserve it. One night in August, 32 men were killed in alleged police shootouts across one city in one night. The president said it was beautiful. And he said that if we killed 32 every day, maybe the drug scourge would end. The trouble with my country is not that we don't understand human rights. The trouble is that we decided one day that some people aren't human. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What's the price of putting the humanity to the statistics? What has happened to journalists in the Philippines?
Well, for one, it's difficult. I used to run with a group, I still run with a group called the Night Shift, or the Night Crawlers, or whatever the world likes to call the people who cover the dead. There were nights we were covering anything from 3 to 13 dead. It depends how many we can get to. So it's crime scene to crime scene, and sometimes we're there before the families get there. So we're there to see when mothers find out that their sons are dead. And it is the worst way to do journalism. It's first-hand witnessing, but you feel you have no right to be there because that's their story. So the price we pay for humanizing, sometimes it's personal. A lot of us believe that for us to be able to tell the story, we have to know everything about the person. So like when we cover disasters, you have to know enough to drown with them so you can tell the story. So I may have interviewed hundreds of people in the last year, but I've only published 17 stories, so that's a lot of people whose stories I haven't told. There are journalists, because I'm a long-form writer, but there are the beat journalists, even the palace reporters, who get further attacked. There's a lot of trolling, there's a lot of threats, there's some doxing involved. My company, Rappler, is being very supportive of this sort of journalism, but we've been attacked even by the president himself. So a price is paid, but I think we can keep paying them.
Thank you. We can take a couple of questions before we have to close the session and move on. You're going to have to shout, given the mics. None? I don't see any hands. Okay, so have you been trolled, Roman? I mean, you sit in the center of the bot armies and the misinformation story.
Yeah, but you know, we don't treat it as a big problem since you know, who cares what some people write about you in the internet? You know, we don't care. I mean, the main thing they write about us is they try to blame us. They try to say that we are American spies, that we are spies of, I don't know, of aliens, of you know, of everybody in the world, and they did a lot of story about me and my colleagues, saying that you know, I'm a spy who is trying to destroy his own country. Because you know, in Russia, when you report about corrupt officials, you are an enemy, but a corrupt official is not an enemy. So it's kind of rule that they established. And but again, I mean, we don't think that this is a big problem. So it is a problem, but you know, it's not the biggest for us.
So just final questions, if I may. What sustains you in times of impunity? What sustains you when you may be looking at a 6-year jail term, Ewald?
Well, let me have a reaction that the story from Philippines produced in me. Yeah, is that maybe an obstacle we have to face as investigative journalists in countries like the one of us, that are very polarized, yeah, against or in favor of a policy, is a kind of a soft obstacle, which is the audience. In some way, somehow we are not only struggling against the government, we are also struggling against the audience, because there is a portion of the audience that, I repeat, amid these polarized societies, that wants to hear what the president is saying, yeah, what President Maduro or President Duterte or President Trump is saying, yeah? Are saying, yeah. So this sector of the audience are not willing to hear the stories we are telling, yeah. So somehow we have to overcome this obstacle, yeah.
Thank you. Just Final comments from our panel. Would you like to start? Do you have a mic, anybody?
Well, I mean, to answer your last question, Ferial, for me, when it comes to South Africa, I mean, we've got, this great democracy, this constitution, which has become the last line of defense. But what sustains me during, this period where we've seen, I recall one government official saying to me, we're going to squeeze you guys so much that you'll start respecting this government. And they were referring to, the withdrawal of advertising in the newspapers, saying that we were anti-government, we did not, deserve to be funded by a government if we are telling anti-government stories. It was, from that moment onward, you keep on telling yourself that you're going to push so hard that your children, our future children, will not have to endure a situation where the Constitution is not respected, where there's a systematic and deliberate breaking down of governance, where looting is made normal, where people go unpunished, which is what we've seen in South Africa in the past 8 years, where we've seen the collapse of the prosecuting authority, the collapse of what is supposed to be the elite crime fighting unit, which is the Hawks. It simply doesn't exist. And you've got a totally incapable South African Revenue Services, which of course is led by the president's friend. We've reported, at least so far, we have proven that in terms of our laws, Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, at least there have been many cases of money laundering, racketeering, which include the president's son, his business partners, their associates. They should be actually in court, but nothing has happened. But instead, what has actually happened is a backlash on us as journalists. But if we want to keep, pushing that constitutional morality, we want, as journalists, to keep those in power in check. We have to keep on pushing. Otherwise, we will have a situation where we're going to have a nuclear program in South Africa that we cannot afford, giving, in fact, committing our children to future debts, which is what is actually pushing us as investigative journalists to push those sort of boundaries.
Thank you.
I would suggest from the experiences that we are seeing all around the world that there is a great social movement, a social tsunami that is underway. There is a significant portion of the world's population that is uncomfortable and troubled by the rapid expansion of human knowledge, the technology it has provided, and the changes it's made in their lifetimes. And so we see in India with Modi, with the Taliban, with the election of Donald Trump, with Duterte, all around the world, we are seeing movements, many of them tied to religious belief, that reject the advancement of human knowledge. And these people are eager to turn to autocrats, to people who will, they feel somehow save them and take away those things they dislike. If, in fact, this is a great social tsunami, like what happened in Europe after the Black Death, took away the control of the church because so many people died, it broke down the sense of faith. There is, in one sense, nothing you can do about it. If the tsunami is coming, you can hold your hand up, but it's just going to run over you. It has to expend its energy. What we can do, what we should do, what we must do is document all of this as thoroughly as we can so that the human spirit does not dwindle, but is ennobled and enabled to grow. And the thing we can do is document what these people are doing, because in time that tsunami will have run out its energy, and what we want to have arise from it is a better world where we don't have 20,683 people murdered by a murderous president. 30,000. 3,000. Okay. We don't want to have imprisonment of journalists for committing the horrible crime of telling the truth. And so even if we fail on one level, if we record this and we bring it to people's attention, as Gandhi taught us, there is something in the human heart that appreciates and recognizes and is sympathetic to people who are fearless and courageous and peaceful.
One more question. So what do you do, though, David, when your audience may get tired of the constant tweets of Trump or the incursions into civil rights? What when they get tired of that kind of coverage?
Well, most of the experience of when you have an autocrat come to power is that there's initial protests and they wear down over time because people realize they aren't getting anywhere and they're intimidated and they're fearful. And human beings are going to behave the way we're wired to behave. All we can do is keep doing what we're supposed to do and not lose heart.
Rita, you spoke earlier about the importance of having a good and supportive infrastructure to do the investigations that you're able to. Share some of that?
Yes, also the nature of ownership of the media in India is changing very rapidly. More and more business houses are coming into the fray, so you also have companies that may also own hotels and in other industries. So the intersection of media owners with the government increases if you are involved in such businesses, and it becomes more difficult for them to do fair and honest journalism. Of course, I'm very fortunate because my company only publishes newspapers and they have no other business interests. And as I said, there have been, and of course, it is accelerating now. There are phone calls. There are pressures that are put in various ways in various countries on various types of media houses. And there would be pressure at my level, there would be pressure at the editor's level, there'd be pressure at the proprietor's level. And fortunately, you don't get to know, I have done both the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, and you are dealing with a huge number of targets or clients or subjects, whatever you want to call them. And of course, the phones start ringing, and they certainly start ringing once you start asking people for comment. And they are top corporates and celebrities, a sprinkle of politicians also. But fortunately, you don't get to know everything. You don't get, your editor may not give you the entire feedback, even after the story is published, but you do get to know something once it is. And it is a little demoralizing if you know the kind of pressure that are being put once a story is in process. But as I said, we have, so there are two reactions if pressure is put. The first could be that we get a message that this is the story that has to be done, just because of that phone call. And the other, of course, is that we have to do it right, do double due diligence, go through everything again, go through a legal check, and all that. But I can say with some pride that I've been head of investigations of the paper for almost 20 years now, and we have never stopped a story.
Fantastic. Very nice. Patricia, last word from you. The Filipino journalists seem to have a lot of solidarity among you. Yes. You work together. How important is that?
It's absolutely important. Dart told me we call it a tribe.
A tribe.
Yes, it is a tribe of like-minded people who see a dead body and who will take a picture and then follow up the story. It's important, I think. And I think it's more important to emphasize that we're not the story, the people who cover it. For us, to speak truth to power is fine. But for every witness we interview, their lives are always at risk. The 12-year-old I mentioned, her family is terrified. Her relatives are terrified because they're afraid they might be next. There are mothers who have lost one son on a drug watch list and 2 days later lost another. So it is not danger to us by telling the story. It's danger to them by talking to us because they might be next hit. So it's a different sort of coverage these days. And I am grateful that there are many of us left standing, and that there are many journalists also across the world who can inspire us to do the same.
So I know we are not the story, but please join me in thanking these wonderful and brave members of our tribe.